So we are starting. Dear friends and colleagues, our dearest students, it is a happy day today because we are starting the school year with a wonderful interaction, hopefully, which would help, first of all, the students, and we know that the university is one and only dedicated for you people, to understand the basic trends of the geopolitics of the Greater Eurasia and the regions corresponding with Eurasia. And today we have many guests, but of course not the number, but the quality and their name. In academics and in international relation matters. We have a guest who came from so far away. He is actually the head of the strategic service of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, Mr. Braz Baracui. We have friends who came from Russia, Yuri Arshinov, and I'm delighted to say that he is now the counselor to the Minister of Economy of Saratov's Oblast, Russian Federation. But of course, he is one of our dearest friends and colleagues with whom we already had a number of events, including glimpses of Eurasia Forum. And we had 4 forums so far. And many seminars, which are, you can see they are recorded and which are published in number of journals. Dr. Yashar Sara, who came from Turkey, from the University of Bolu. And he is a very well-known expert on Central Asia. And together with his friend, Dr. Seyit Ali Avcu, they made number of projects on religious situation and on security situation in Central Asia. They spent many years of their academic life in Kyrgyzstan. Dr. Puneet Gaur, who is a beloved professor of the Faculty of International Relations, Department of Regional Studies, and he is teaching there, as you all know, for 3 years now. And who is, of course, an expert on Central Asia as well, who has number of projects on Silk Route initiatives. Dr. Ramkrishna Pradhan, who came from Orissa, Balasore. And this is western part of India, eastern part of India, sorry. And you can say that in Orissa, this northern Indian view on Central Asia ends. Because from Balasore and so on, no one studies Central Asia as they do say in Chandigarh, in GNU in Delhi, or in Orissa. And of course, our beloved Dr. Andrei Shenin, who is also teaching here from starting from 2016, and who became so familiar with Eurasia National University, and an expert on Afghanistan and the United States. So I will give a floor first to Dr. Arshinov, who will be moderating, and then to Dr. Avcu, who will be co-moderating. And dear colleagues, please let me remind you that whenever you speak, you have to speak into microphone and press the button. Otherwise, nothing would be recorded. And for us, it is crucial to be recorded. Thank you.
Добрый день, уважаемая Акбата Ниязовна. Добрый день, уважаемые участники из Казахстана, Бразилии, Индии, Турции. Очень большая честь вас приветствовать здесь сегодня, ибо Евразийский национальный университет для всех нас – это не просто вуз, учебное заведение, где можно выступить, это некая площадка, где мы формируем новые смыслы, и в нашем международном партнерстве, международной кооперации создаются новые возможности для решения действительно важных задач по развитию сотрудничества между нашими странами. Поэтому сегодняшнее мероприятие, международная конференция «Большая евразия. Мир. Внешняя политика, геополитика и безопасность» – это как раз то мероприятие, которое мы с вами способны и проведем на самом высоком уровне. Предлагаемый формат выступления до 10 минут, так чтобы каждый смог спокойно высказать свои мысли и чтобы мы смогли подискутировать. Предлагаю вопросы выступающим отложить на завершение мероприятия, чтобы все успели выступить. Ну что, друзья, начинаем работу. Господин Сид, добавите что-то для англоязычных участников?
Good morning, dear friends. We are starting our conference. We have many speakers. That's why we would like to ask you to limit your speech to 10 minutes. And then at the end, we will have half an hour questions and answers period. So keep your questions till the end. And then we start now. I think I am the first one. I can announce myself. Okay. Is it PowerPoint ready? Okay. Good morning again. My topic is Belts and Road Initiative and challenges and prospects for Turkey. I will talk a little bit about Turkish economy in general and Turkey's relations with China. It is on, yes. And Turkey's role in BRI, and I will have a SWOT analysis at the end, very briefly. I have many slides, so I will go a little fast, and you can ask me questions at the end. Although Turkish economy is going through tough times now, Turkey is the 17th largest economy in the world and the 6th in Europe. In terms of GDP, it is the 2.2 trillion. Purchasing power parity in terms of that 13th largest economy, but nominally $900 billion. And Turkish economy grew 2.9% in 2016, which was a very bad year for Turkey. But average between 2002 and 2016, it grew about 5.6%. And Turkey's position in the world is very strategic. And once actually Russian and Napoleon was trying to agree each other, and then Alexander, the Tsar of Russia, said, "Let's get together and conquer the Istanbul." And then Napoleon said, "Then you would be ruling the world then." So that's why it is a very strategic position between Europe and Asia and Africa. Uh, you can fly to any of these countries in all the Europe in 4 hours, and half of Africa and Eurasia. In terms of energy corridor, that the Turkey is a hub and would like to be a hub, and this is the existing and proposed oil and natural gas pipelines. As you can see, that the red ones are the natural gas pipelines, and the green ones the oil pipelines. In terms of bilateral relations between China and Turkey, is that there is 3 periods in history. Before 2000, the trade was very minimal, and the second period that the trade began to increase since 2005, and since 2010 it accelerated and reached to total $26 billion. As you can see here, that in 2017 it reached to 26 billion from the 1.6 billion in 2002. But the problem is that there is a imbalance between trade. Turkey imports much more than export to China, and what actually exports to China is what other countries exporting is raw materials, and what Turkey is buying from China is phones, toys, and like everyone else, that everybody is doing the same. That China is producing most of world's production now, and this is the Turkey's import from China, mostly finished products. And China began to notice Turkey and began to invest a lot. In 2016, trade reached to 27 billion. China has become the second largest trading partner of Turkey after Germany. The Chinese-funded enterprises flourished in Istanbul, and nearly 60 Chinese-funded enterprises such as Huawei and ZTE took root in Turkey. And since 2014, the completion of the second phase of the Ankara-Istanbul high-speed rail project by Chinese and Turkish enterprises. And this was the first Chinese high-speed train outside China. So it is quite important. And Chinese banks acquired banks in Turkey, and COSCO, which is a state company of China, bought Comport, third largest port of Turkey, which China has been doing. They also bought port in Greece and other countries that has a shore. As I said, the China noticed Turkey, and Turkey is historically at the western end of the Silk Road, and is quite important in terms of strength. That this relationship is that, as I mentioned, that Turkey has many good qualities, including geopolitical positions and infrastructure, and economies fastest growing. And in 2010, China and Turkey became military strategic partners and collaborating in many areas: energy, transportation, infrastructure. And in 2015, lately, that signed agreement to trade in Turkish lira and Chinese yuan. And both countries have political will. Turkey completed many projects to help its One Belt, One Road position. And one of these is a railroad project that connects Turkey to BRI. And this is called the Marmaray projects. With this, that the train can travel from Beijing to London. Marmaray completed, and then the third bridge over Bosphorus, Yavuz Sultan Selim Bridge, was completed in 2016. And this is the bridge. This is the Marmaray project. And also Baku Tbilisi Kars Railway was completed and opened last year in October. In terms of weaknesses, that the scale of cooperation keeps on expanding, but the volume is still limited, hardly reaching the investment potential and expectations of both sides. Chinese investment in Turkey is increasing, but still far behind the volume of Chinese investment in Europe, and still very small amount as compared to European investment in Turkey, and hardly meeting Turkey's potential and expectations. The area of cooperation is expanding, but the investment items, categories, projects are still small, cannot cover all related fields and industrial link. The area of Chinese investment in Turkey is mainly in telecom, finance, transportation, energy, mining, production, and agriculture. Overall, the project categories are few, and high-end manufacturing and high value added industry are also few and insufficient. For instance, in the area of energy, the investment is in traditional coal burning power plants. Investment in smart electricity that Turkey plans to develop greatly awaits expansion. And the investment in Turkey mostly done by Chinese companies, and private sector is not part of it. And also cooperation is through only construction and stock market. My time is limited, so I'm skipping some of that. And in terms of opportunities, that China with annual exports of more than 2 trillion exported Turkey with only 25 billion in 2016, while importing only 2.3 billion from Turkey. The modern Silk Road may play an important role in promoting the balance between the two sides. The normal 30-day transit period between Turkey and China is expected to be reduced to 10 days within the scope of modern Silk Road. China is Turkey's second largest trade partner, as I mentioned, and Turkey expects China to invest more in Turkey, and this would be the part of middle corridor in this new Silk Road. And recently, Turkey has problems and was turning towards the east to China to borrow money from China. And in terms of threat, as newly emerging industrialized nations, China and Turkey has great degree of similarity in industrial structure, thus competitive characteristics are prominent. China and Turkey's exports are similar: textile products and material, electrical and mechanical products, metal products, and transportation equipment are on the top of the export list in both countries. In Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East, the two countries compete against each other fiercely, and thus the key areas economic frictions arise. And actually, Turkey is losing in this competition against China. In many countries, we see less and less like Turkish products in Central Asia. I don't know, maybe some colleagues can comment on that. Eurasian Economic Union has something to do with it. And second threat is that Turkey is located in the volatile region of Middle East, where war is going on in Syria. There is a danger that the conflicts might spread. The security of the One Belt, One Road needs to be provided. China might decide to continue using the northern corridor through Russia. rather than utilizing the southern corridor. And lastly, the Uyghur problem, recently exacerbated because of the education camps of Uyghurs. Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, as you all know, that in northwest China and the neighbor to Kazakhstan, and which is East Turkestan. Xinjiang actually means a new territory. For Turks, it is not a new territory. It is Eastern Turkestan. The Uyghurs and the Turks share the language and history and culture, and many Uyghur diaspora in Turkey and Turks feel strongly about the Uyghur issue. But recently, because of the economic problems, the Turkish political will favored the China over Uyghur issues, and just it was in the news that Turkey was agreed to expel like 80 Uyghurs to China. And conclusion, despite problems, Turkey will continue to be part of the BRI, and cooperation between China and Turkey will increase and deepen. Thank you.
Спасибо за выступление, господин Ауджу. Проведенный вами анализ показал новые возможности, те, которые, безусловно, и Турция, как важнейший участник региональных международных отношений, сможет использовать и предложить, собственно говоря, в международной кооперации другим при реализации всего потенциала экономического пояса Великого Шелкового пути. Выявленные вами риски, безусловно, я думаю, вызвали интерес у слушателей доклада. И в конце я попрошу приготовить вопросы касательно как раз вот затронутых проблем господину Авджу. Я думаю, он с удовольствием ответит в конце выступления. А сейчас в развитии темы международной кооперации мы передаем слово начальнику отдела стратегического планирования Министерства иностранных дел Бразилии, господину Бразу Баракую. Я думаю, нам будет всем очень интересно узнать, каким образом развиваются международные отношения с участием крупнейшей страны, такой как Бразилия, потому что Международное объединение стран БРИКС уже зарекомендовало себя в качестве серьезной организации, способной выводить проблемы развития международных отношений на новый высокий уровень. Господин Си, добавить?
Now I invite our guest from Deputy Director for Policy Planning of Brazilian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Braz Barracuya.
So, good morning. I'm very, very pleased to be here today. As your dean has said, I have traveled a long time to be here, but it is with a great satisfaction that I'm here, because it's a great opportunity, first of all, to visit Kazakhstan. It's beautiful, Astana, but also to have a closer look of how Eurasia is being shaped and reshaped. And that's precisely what I want to talk to you this morning. I'm not going to go through a PowerPoint presentation, but I just want to show you some maps here and some ideas, because what I want to do is to perhaps give you a hint, a flavor of what Brazil is, and how we see ourselves geopolitically on the one hand, and on the other, how we perceive the transformation of Eurasia, the Belt and Road Initiative, and the challenges and opportunities that are here. So let me start by this very uh, important moment of our history, which is the Treaty of Tordesillas. It was in 1494. It is very important for this region because this treaty uh, was formed and it was established precisely when the old Silk Road, which united Eurasia, was actually collapsing. And it was collapsing because of the Age of Discovery. And so this imaginary line that divided the geopolitical competition of the world between Portugal and Spain, that actually divided the world between them. This treaty line actually is our birth certificate, because Brazil's frontiers, so to speak, they were born even before the country was discovered. Um, and that gives you precisely the line. And as you see, Brazil, it's just a part of Brazil was actually uh, uh, in the scope of the Tordesillas Treaty, but it gives us a good hint of how the country perceived itself. If you look at this, the next map that I'll show you, this is the Cantino World Map. It is from 1502. The map was actually stolen by an Italian diplomat. Diplomats used to do that at the time. But what he did, he copied a map um, from the Lisbon archives, and this is the map that perhaps first shows um, the known world. 1502, you see Brazil, you see the hints of the country there, and you see the idea of a continental island being formed, and that's precisely the sort of um, element that composed perhaps what we could we could call the constant themes of Brazil's historical experience. First of all, the idea of expansion. As you remember, we just got a small strip of land by the Tordesillas Treaty. Therefore, more and more the Brazilian um, Portuguese and then the Brazilians started to expand the country towards the west. Uh, you have the idea of union that got into the historical experience, and which was consolidated by the work of diplomacy over the centuries. And you have the idea of greatness, actually. What George Kennan used to call the hubris of size. Brazil got big, and this idea gave to the political elite from the monarchy in Brazil, but also after the monarchy, the idea of a role in the world to be played. And that's interesting because if you look geopolitically, South America, you will see. I'm talking about the idea of island, and you'll see perfectly the island here. An island that is not surrounded by water completely, but is an island that is surrounded by the Amazon forest on the one hand, and is surrounded by the Andes mountains throughout the South. Um, I emphasize that because, and that's where I stop in terms of this defining experience, that Brazil is geostrategic an island, that this idea of inverting the capital of an empire back from Portugal during the Napoleonic Wars that have been mentioned to my colleague here. Um, uh, but the idea of the inversion of European empire being based in South America and a monarchy that was formed and lasted until 1889, surrounded by republics of our neighbors. This gave a very peculiar and perhaps particular view of Brazil and the world. And what I want to um, pose to you now is I don't want to show you more slides, but what I want to pose to you now is how we see this larger development of Eurasia as a whole, and how this historical experience combines with that. Well, first of all, um, we see an immense challenge, a geopolitical challenge being formed here. Why? Because there are at least two competing views of how Eurasia should be shaped. Uh, you have the US view, the traditional view of Eurasia. And this view uh, is basically a geopolitical view of Eurasia divided. Right? It's Eurasia formed by different balances of power. One balance of power in Europe, one balance of power in the Middle East, one balance of power in Central Asia, another one in the Asia Pacific. And the role of America, the role of the US as an external holder of this balance of power. Uh, Another view that it's taking shape now, China's view of Eurasia, is the one that emphasizes integration, that emphasizes connection, that emphasizes infrastructure. It's also, of course, a geopolitical view, but it's one that is different for the countries involved in the region, and is a vision that entails different consequences. One of the consequences of China's view, the Belt and Road Initiative, is that it not only gives China the narrative, the idea of going away of its own national views of the world, but it gives more integral view of the region and the world itself. So Brazil as a key player on China's trade relations and investment relations, and Brazil having a key concern in terms of peace and stability and security throughout the world. Why? Because we are being a country that has global interests. Some of the key elements of peace and stability are vital for us. Our trade and our investment depend on a geopolitical stability. So diplomacy is a way to deal with these elements of order and stability. We see the development in Eurasia very closely. We see how the Belt and Road Initiative evolves in a very close fashion, because we think that the consequences of a more integrated Eurasia will have world consequences. This is not only classical geopolitics in its essence, but it's also a consequence of closer diplomatic relations that we expect to have between our region and this region. And let me just finish by saying that we in Brazil and in the foreign ministry in particular, we are in the process of establishing closer and closer relations with Kazakhstan. Why? Because we think that Kazakhstan has a vital role to play in this overall scheme of things. We think that Kazakhstan is positioned in a way in Eurasia that is a privileged position, not only for Kazakhstan, of course, but for us to understand what's going on in this whole process. It's not by coincidence that our diplomatic academy in Brazil and the diplomatic academy of Kazakhstan, they signed an agreement recently, and we expect to have students from both academies in our countries in a process that will, with time, give a way for a closer relationship between our countries. I will stop here, but I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, господин Баракуй, за такое выступление, которое нам позволило понять, что на самом деле мы очень мало знаем о Бразилии, хотя это очень недооцененный субъект международных отношений, несмотря на то, что созданы такие механизмы, как БРИКС, о чем я уже говорил. Между тем, роль Бразилии, она будет только возрастать. И как вы верно отметили, сейчас классическое видение рассматривается, что в Евразии два основных сценария. То есть это американо-китайское противоборство. Но, безусловно, и ваше выступление, и в целом явление в Казахстане, видимо, тоже не случайно отводит к Казахстану, указывает на то, что мир становится более многосторонним, и сценарии развития, они не обязаны быть основаны на классической геополитике, которая, в принципе, по факту носит на себе отпечаток атлантической мысли, то есть разделяй и властвуй, то есть что океан якобы должен постоянно сдерживать развитие континента. Вот в частности Бразилия, как вы отметили, это остров, который может как раз привнести совершенно новый этап конструктивной атлантической, тихоокеанской политики в Большую Евразию. Поэтому огромное спасибо вам за выступление. Вопросы господину Баракую сейчас или мы все-таки отложим на потом? Конечно, Акбар Таньязовна, хозяевам все можно.
I'm actually violating all the rules of today's seminar, but I couldn't just stay silent because, first of all, this is actually a great success that Mr. Baraku is here because some 4 years ago, no, I will start further. Brazil was actually the first country among Mercosur countries who opened an embassy here in Astana in 2013, with simultaneously Kazakhstan opening its embassy in Brasilia. And I know very well about these things because my sister was one of those who went for that embassy, and she worked a lot with those countries because, as it was our first embassy, it had to deal with not only Brazil but Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Venezuela, and so on. So it was very important. But at the same time, analysts from Argentina were faster to see the strategic vision of Kazakhstan within Eurasia, and to understand that we do have to work together, we have to communicate. And at the end of 2013, just after the embassy opened, a very interesting person from Argentina contacted our embassy in Brasilia, Dr. Paulo Botta, and he is a well-known person here now. And he said that I need communication with Kazakhstani scholars and institutions. And he also, same as Dr. Barakoy, started his trip to Kazakhstan from visiting Diplomatic Academy or Institute of Diplomacy, where he made signing of an MOU agreement between our Institute of Diplomacy with University of La Plata, which is situated not far away from Buenos Aires, and with the Diplomatic Academy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Argentina. And then just after this visit in 2014, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Argentina making something very untypical, where they include Kazakhstan as top of 15 countries which are priority for the foreign economy interest of Argentina, which states that from now on we have to expand to the region and we have to study region more. But one of the things that are still not so satisfactory, that we still don't have an embassy in Argentina, which is also a big country, and we don't have Argentinian embassy here. So, actually, one thing that Dr. Paulo made here is that he initiated an opening of Centro de Mercosur at the faculty. So we are, if not doing, but trying to do some studies on the region. We do have PhD students who are doing their research, and they are actually first in Kazakhstan who are doing and it is very difficult. Mulder, would you please rise up? Our student Mulder Bolspekova is her research title is the comparison of Mercosur and Eurasian Economic Union, political willingness and limits. And we know that limits are much more than the willingness. And I hope that we will overcome this. And we have a number of master students who are also studying Latin America. That was a very big, very brief remark, but I think that that was needed. And welcome to Kazakhstan.
Акбатан Ниязовна, разрешите только выразить вам глубокую признательность за то, что вы так тонко чувствуете актуальные проблемы международных отношений. И вот сейчас, как вы до этого развивали отношения с Аргентиной, сейчас уже новый трек отношений и развития с Бразилией, а у вас уже есть готовые специалисты по региону, что немаловажно. Находясь в Центральной Азии, вы имеете таких специалистов. Вот, допустим, вот у нас в нашем заслуженном Саратовском госуниверситете нет специалистов по латинской. Ну, тем более ценен ваш вклад. Это старт, это начало, основание новой школы. Спасибо большое за вашу насыщенную ремарку. Хотел бы предоставить слово профессору университета Абант Изет Байсалт из Турции, господину Ясару Сари, с темой выступления «Центральная Азия. Концептуализация Евразии. Тестирование теории международных...» Нет, я прошу прощения. Центральная Азия, да? Центральная... Концептуализация Евразии. Тестирование теории международных отношений. Пожалуйста.
It's working. Good morning. Today, my presentation, more conceptual presentation, conceptualization of the Eurasia, testing
theories of international relation. So probably all of us knows what is the Eurasia, because our university name is the Eurasian National University, name of the Gumilyev, which is the one of the very important theorists on this subject. So I will not touch much about what we know the history of the Eurasia, how this idea is developed. Of course, classical times mainly is done by Russian Russian immigrant who left Russia after the revolution, Trubetsky and Savitsky and so on. In the Soviet time, we see the Gumilyev, and these days in Russia is the famous Alexander Dugin. My perspective is I will use the Eurasian concept more broader sense and trying to explain with the international relation theories. You know, international relation theories trying to explain the systemic structure of the international politics, and as well as the actors which play an important role. So looking from that perspective, we can also use the Eurasian concept, which is can applicable to the international relation. So Eurasian concept is not just related the Russian thinkers, or Eurasian concepts not only related Kazakhstan, like the Nazarbayev versus 1994, later 2009, emphasized on this concept, or Eurasian and not only related Turkey, which is the last 10, 15 years becoming one of the dominant approach to understand and explain the international politics. So I will look through from the international relation theory. If we are looking the main stream international relation, realism perspective, if we look the realism perspective, we see the Eurasian concept used in geopolitical terms. It's not just today, during the Cold War time, even before the Cold War time, 1930s, Rimland theories developed by Spikesman, and then the George Cannon containment theory related Eurasia, and Mahan's and Mackinder's theory also. Mackinder theory is related Eurasia. The last one is the maybe 1990s and early 2000s. Brzezinski's chessboard is concentrated on the Eurasia. In that sense, when the scholars looking the Eurasia, they look the geopolitical sense and the competition, competition among the major powers to be dominant power in the region. So when they define the Eurasia, they define the Eurasia a combination of the Europe and Asia as a geographical one continent, and the struggle among the states. I will put a little bit different perspective, even though Chinese doesn't use Eurasia, but if you look the Belt Road Initiative, where it's happening between the Asia and the Europe, and this is in that sense we can say that Chinese practical approach, Eurasia is a kind of neoliberalist, neo-institutionalist, which is giving the importance of the economy on the international relation. That sense is their approach also kind of to fit with the neoliberal theory of the international relation. Why? Because neoliberal theory of international relation emphasized on economic relation, as well as a cooperation among the state will benefit. So Belt and Road Initiative, even some may criticize this initiative as a tool of the Chinese creating hegemonic area, sphere of influence, but we can see most of the countries on this line, this road initiative line, is cooperating with China. In that sense, we can see that neoliberal institutionalism can applicable. But the best among the best approaches, which may describe the can use the Eurasia as a theory of international relations, the constructivism. because constructivism is the concentrated on the identity, interest, and security relation, and both this concept, security and identity, socially constructed, can be changed and influence each other. So Gumuliev, when he mentioned about the ethnogenesis, the Slavs and Turkic tribes and groups can living in similar areas, and the geography affecting their lifestyle, their approach to the world, and so on. So they can coexist and co-live together. That way, they can establish a kind of. He's not saying the civilization, but they can be peacefully live together and cooperate each other. In that sense, Gumuliev approach is the fit that explanation. The other school which may applicable, I mean, can use the Eurasian concept is the we call Copenhagen Security School. Copenhagen Security School is concentrated on the regional security issues and saying that security and identity interact, and social realities sometimes make the social security problem. If the social realities, the identity of the countries are close and they define the same issues as a threat, if they have this similar threat perception, then they can cooperate, establish regional communities, regional security communities, which is the Nazarbayev trying to do that one, because Nazarbayev, as a president of Kazakhstan is the both have huge border with Russia, has historical relation with Russia, but same times a Turkic nation. So wants to keep its own national identity strong, and realize that the Kazakhstan can play a middle role between Russia and Turkey, or the Turkic nation in Central Asia, which is we see the several times Nazarbayev took that responsibility as a seriously solving the Russian-Turkish crisis problem, and asking the Putin to inviting Turkey to be Eurasian Economic Union. So this is the which we can use the Copenhagen Security School approaches to understand that one. The last one which I want to mention and finalize, because probably I passed my time, is the critical theory. Critical theory basically, pardon. Critical theory basically is criticizing the current international system and structure. Sorry. And saying that this all theories of international relation has some meaning and some reason those theories develop, which is leading critical theory theoretician Robert Cox mentioned this one. So why not the Russian, I mean the Eurasian societies and states and the thinkers cannot develop the new idea, which is the challenging the current international understanding and understanding of international politics. So Eurasia may be one of the concepts which can be developed. So in that sense, looking the historical background, looking the historical background and power order relation, that is the Eurasia can be a good concept to use to explain the critical theory. Let me stop here. I couldn't enter it deeply, but if you have question, I'm ready to answer.
Спасибо большое господину Сари за выступление. Хотелось бы несколько таких небольших ремарок, пользуясь правом модератора. Хотелось бы вот что отметить. Мне кажется, западная историография и в целом современные эксперты несколько переоценивают вообще значение трудов классических евразийцев. Да, если мы на Савицкого ориентируемся, безусловно, Гумилев Лев Николаевич является одним из основателей той мысли по объединению, то Дугина относить к евразийству современному никаким образом не стоит. Это как бы маргинальные исследователи, и, безусловно, те исследования, которые мы сейчас проводим, и в целом российская политика по конструированию Евразийского экономического союза совместно с Казахстаном и другими участниками, она коренным образом расходится с теорией Дугина. То есть я бы не стал, в принципе, его здесь. Это первая ремарка. И второе, я хотел бы отметить, безусловно, роль Казахстана как медиатора между Россией и тюркским миром. В принципе, это очень ярко было продемонстрировано в кризисе 14-15 годов. Именно роль лично президента страны Нурсултана Абишевича Назарбаева, который сумел наши страны, имея в виду Россию и Турцию, вывести из очень сложного трека. И сейчас мы видим, что залог как раз взаимопонимания Турции и России дает определенный успех, делает свой вклад в стабильность на Ближнем и Среднем Востоке. Вот мои небольшие ремарки. Вопросы господину Сари, если будут, пожалуйста, фиксируйте. Наконец мы оставим и обязательно господину Сари зададим эти вопросы. А сейчас мы передаем слово директору стратегического центра по изучению Центральной Азии, Южной Азии, Ближнего Востока факультета международных отношений ЕНУ, господин. Пожалуйста, тем более сейчас это очень важно дополнить выступающих из Бразилии, России. Таким образом у нас практически БРИКС-консенсус формируется.
Thank you very much, Yuri. At the outset, I would like to give so many thanks to the organizer of this conference to give me this opportunity to present my views on Silk Road, especially as an Indian scholars. And I also congratulate them to the timely executions of this conference about Greater Eurasia. And whenever you are talking about the research on Silk Road and as an working as a researcher on Silk Road, you have to see what are the surroundings, things which is happening in the research area is that. And as a researcher, I feel these last 5 years, despite that fact that we are having the 5 year celebrations of completion of this BRI project of China, despite these facts, these last 1 year or so, what we are witnessing as a researcher that Greater Eurasia is coming up harder than BRI in this at least these last 4 or 5 years. And you are talking about in the terms of in the context of this particular reasons. And the Indian scholars that why India is skeptical, still skeptical about this BRI project. Why India is not on board on this whole BRI concept of China. At that time in 2013, the same line we agree on that when our foreign ministry took this line that we have to wait and watch what is going to happen, all this policy of BRI. I'll give you some prominent examples what is happening right now. Recently, before 2 3 days, Maldives made a statement. The Prime Minister of Maldives made a statement that China made us in debt. The second thing which I am talking about here, that Imran Khan, who is the Prime Minister now of the Pakistan, and the first speech of his to nation, you have to analyze this speech, where he talked about that the kind of borrowing we are loan, China giving us loan, it is very hard to repay that loan. It is not about only Pakistan. It is not only about Maldives. Even all the South Asian countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka are having sometimes these kind of views that it can be a problem in the future for us, that what kind of debt we are in the context of China. And that particular kind of problem is not only in the South Asia, but what as I am witnessing in so far these last 3 4 years in Central Asian countries also, though they have another options of Russia and America, but they are diluting to each others. They are try to triangulate themselves as a country, as a nation state between Russia, China, and America. And that's why they are also having this problem that what is happen in the future if we are having giving so much importance to China. This is very important as a research scholars, as a scholars, that what are the criteria where we can judge this BRI. And you can see in these last 4 or 5 years that what is happening. And 5 years is not the time to judge, to calculate any kind of policy which is given by a China itself, which is called BRI. In fact, you are talking about that several countries are coming up into this, criticizing this, that not criticizing, but at least having some doubt on about this. You are, I gave you example about Maldives, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Nepal. Even all the Central Asian countries are also having that kind of at least and in a mind that that kind of a problem. That's why I'm saying this is one of the very important timely execution of the conference about Greater Eurasia. What we can have, though China is also having this interest to having this collaboration with the Eurasian Economic Union, he already have this view to collaborate on these things. This is my preface of my paper, which I am starting to talk about this Indian approach to China's BRI. There are other affirmative actions also which are taking place. It is not that the all negative things is happening about this BRI, but there are affirmative actions. We are not on board because as far as our foreign ministry is saying that China is very much concerned about this sovereignty, though we are also very much concerned about our own sovereignty, because he is building the CPEC is all about the illegal, going into the illegal land. That's why it's India's views. So that's why they are saying that we are more skeptical about this China's CPEC. We are not. In fact, the other point of view is that we are the part of AIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. This is also an initiative of China. We are there with the BRICS also with China, but still we are only skeptical about the CPEC, China Pakistan Economic Corridor. And that's why this is important to us to behave or to action, to give action accordingly in that scenario. But what is India's positions? First, you have to understand what is the China's policy about all this BRI. Then we will come into the India's approach. What is globalization? What we are talking about the globalization is very first important things is interdependency. And whenever it's your own needs, what is interdependency? Interdependency means it's your own national interest which is served first. Either you are talking about interdependency or you are talking about globalization. This is very first action you have to need about your own national interest, which is described by each and every kind of theories of international relation. Right, realism is all about this thing, which is previously Yasir already talked about these things. But why important for China this particular BRI? Accumulation of financial reserve. You know that China, why China is starting this, having this kind of initiative? 3.8 trillion US dollar as a foreign reserve China has. Where he is going to having this investment? It is needed for China to have this. This is very much needed for China to have these policies on in 2013. And as being the second world trading power and perpetuating this growth model, this is also very important for China. And export expertise in fields of infrastructure, steel and cement, like India is an IT. And we have to accept this fact. The China has uh, expertise in the field of infrastructure, steel and cement. That's why the most prominent element of this BRI is infrastructure investment. And China is doing these things all over the world because he has the expertise of this investment. But problem is that the way he is doing into this, about the labor, the kind of the problem which we are facing in the context of labor, where they are sending their own labor, they are not merging the local labors into this whole BRI. This is also a one of kind of a problem into this BRI. And the modernization, first and foremost, always we learn about this thing and we listen in all speeches that the western part of China, which is Xinjiang, which was the highest oil and gas reserve but lowest development. And this is the prominent things which is China is going to have, that we are developing, we want to develop this western our western area which is called Xinjiang. But still there are Uyghur problems, and we all knew about all this in this context. So that away from this whole point, this is another two, three main points which I want to focus on, that how to managing this vast overcapacity which China has. That's why this is created by BRI. Necessity to find new markets. It's a necessity for China to find new markets because of overproductions and of the growth model founded on investment in infrastructure and exports. This is a growth model which you have to look into the economic perspective, which is already earned by the infrastructure and the exports. Now they have to find out new ways according to BRI, and they are doing this. Future growth of China based on domestic consumptions. This is also very prominent things to talk about BRI into this context. RMB, China's currency, to become one of the top three major currency of the world by 2015. These are points are very much sufficient to tell you how China is started all this initiative, and why are we are talking still about this on these issues of China's initiative into this matter, which I already explained that in another context, that this is can be a critical as well or positive as well. And in this context, we should see the one of the gain policy of China in its history, OBOR. What is OBR? We all knew. I'm not going to deep into this particular investment of one belt and one road and maritime and sea route. And China wants to gain improved access to the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea through Central Asia. This is also one of the important element of this. Even not Central Asia, about and the Middle East and to the Indian Ocean throughout Southeast Asia and South Asia. But what is the example we are having right now with the South Asia, which I already gave you? Huge investment. There are 4 or 5 banks like Silk Road Fund, AIIB, Import Export Bank of China, China Development Bank, BRICS, SCO. They all are on the boards. They are all are the primarily investment companies of BRIs. And why this huge with this huge investment, there are 6 or 5 important: the new Eurasia land bridge economic corridor, China Mongolia Russian economic corridor, China Central Asia West Asia corridor. And now how India see this is important to see how India see this initiative of China, and in what way we can explain the approach of India towards OBOR or BRI, especially the challenges. India as the emerging economy shares a contested border with China, worries about containment and new pathways for aggression from Pakistan. This is very first and foremost important element of India's approach to China's BRI. In the other hand, maritime Silk Road reinforce India's concern about encirclement. China's port development in Indian Ocean, especially in terms of dual-use facilities, complicating India's security calculations. This is also very important to understand, and more bilateral rather than multilateral. This is also another aspects of this important segment of BRI. And hegemonic design as a hidden agenda. This is all new about this thing. What is this? Is not for a social cause. This is not for a kind of a cause which they are elaborating into this whole in the whole scenario of the Silk Road. That's why the last year Belt and Road Forum held in Beijing, and we were not there. India is the only country where we were not the only. He managed only 65 countries into that. But still, what is the positive way of this India's approach into this? As the benefit for India to joining China's OBR initiative, one apparent and the economic reason is compelling. That is the only compelling reason to us why we should be there with China into this. Because in terms of bilateral trade of $70.08 billion in 2016, China remains India's largest trading partner. And last year also saw record Chinese investment into India reaching cross $1 billion. These are the economic compulsion for us to being a part of this gained or huge policy of BRI and BIMSTEC. What is the example? Another example where we are investing with the China. So this is not all about only criticizing this policy, but we have to look into this matter, that what we are doing and how we are doing into these things. And that's why this economic compulsion is always there with India. How to manage this is important, and that's there are another which I written to that what are the India's option in terms of its own initiatives, like Myanmar Kaladan projects was there. Our own initiatives, Chahabar project is always already there, and very well known the international north-south transport corridor. We are initiating this concept, and in the recruit Indians and Japanese government are also working. Even India is also developing with Australia, and America is also developing a kind of initiative where he have their own impression in South Asia, and we are using on it. That, to be very frank, we are also using these facts. What China is doing with Pakistan and what we are doing with this is whole a kind of a game which is playing on in terms of this whole BRI projects, and everyone wants to be a part of this for their own interests, and that's why this is whole creation of this whole BRI, and that is the maximum approach which we are having for this BRI project. And this is Indian. I just explained you what is India's view about this BRI all about. Uh, And if you have any questions, I would like to give you answer. Thank you. Thanks.
I don't want to cut you.
I knew. I knew.
Thank you to Dr. Gaur for a very compelling presentation. I would like to actually tie his presentation with Professor Yashar Sarı's. He didn't have time to go into critical theories of Eurasia much, but Professor Gaur completed that touching especially the Marxist theory of dependency theory that China is creating, especially with the small countries, and overproduction in terms of international political economy, which actually it is somehow has a resemblance with the Germany's overcapacity at the end of the 19th century, which caused the basically World War One. So we will see how these will play out in future in terms of in Eurasia, all these initiative. One thing about the India is that as you didn't have time to go into more positive aspect of India's own projects. Like, it is not only enough to be against something. It is important to put something in instead. For example, like China solved all these border issues with Central Asian countries long time ago, since their independence, and China really doesn't have any major issues, and quite even handling well the Uyghur issue. But India should really step up and maybe solve the Kashmir issue with the Pakistan. Like, this has been going on for a long time and become one of the frozen conflict. So maybe focus on more like what India can do as one of the biggest economy in the world in terms of Central Asia. Maybe create a north-south Silk Road, which historically existed. Actually, I think that Professor Rama will complete this. His topic is geopolitics of Central Asia and the Silk Road rivalries.
We change the topic.
Huh? You changed the